Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a college basketball slate featuring 4 games. This slate is really interesting. We have some good value plays. There's a lot more great plays at guard than there are forward, but we do have good plays across the board, also in all price ranges, so it's going to be fairly easy to utilize any player you want on the slate, and I definitely have some good recommendations for you from that perspective. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Then I'll do a team breakdown after the main part. So we're going to start with our guards here. And I do have 2 players on my list here that are what I would say are the 2 core plays of the slate. But before I get into this, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel a lot. So we're going to start with Dwayne Cohill for Youngstown State. He is my favorite guard on the slate. He's been really good versus NKU this season. I expect him to play well again. He gets good rebounds and assists for a guard, and he shoots a lot. He really hasn't had many bad games this season at all, and he's priced pretty fair. And we actually like his price considering the fact that we do need to find some guys to pay up for today, and he's a great option on the slate. And he's the top guard rather to play from that position. Then we're going to look at Tay Williams. Now, Tay Williams can play both guard or forward, which is nice. And so if you want to utilize him, he would definitely not hurt to potentially put him in the forward position. And that's going to be true for a couple other players on the slate as well. But he has as much upside as anybody. He dominated UWM this season, the 2 games he's played against them. His floor is not good when he doesn't shoot the ball much, though, which is a concern here. But he does rebound pretty well for a guard, and he's managed to have 3 double-doubles this season, and 2 of them were against UWM. He has a lower floor and a higher ceiling than Brandon Rush, who I'll just talk about here in just a second, who's the closest player comparably when it comes to price and potential. So we're actually going to talk about Brandon Rush next for Youngstown State. He's a little bit cheaper than Tay Williams, and he has just as much potential here. He has been over 13 fantasy points in every start this season. Last time versus NKU, he had 28 fantasy points. The time before that, he didn't start and didn't do very well, but he is starting for the second half of the season, and he's been playing really good minutes as a pretty safe floor. 6 of the last 9 games, he's been over 21 fantasy points as well. So, like I said, he does have he has a better floor than Williams has, but he doesn't have the ceiling that Williams has. And so either one of them are viable, but you have to, consider what you need. But if you need a forward, then Tay Williams is definitely a better option. Then we're going to look at Marquise Browning, the second here for Milwaukee. He's at $4,700. Now, he came back from injury the last game and played around 20 minutes. He should get more minutes in this game. Last time against Cleveland State, he was very good, though he has not had any games under 10 fantasy points all season long. At this price point, he's a very safe play from that perspective, though I'm a little concerned about the fact that he's just coming back from injury, and he had 11 fantasy points in the last game playing 19 or 20 minutes. But he should have more minutes in this one. If he does start, that would also give him a nice boost, as he does start most of the season. He may not be quite as safe as some of his teammates, but he's still viable on the slate as a great option as a value play. Then we're going to look at Pulliam for Milwaukee as well. Now, he is a little bit cheaper than Browning, and I almost use him as a core play because he's been really good as the second best scorer on this team. He's also rebounded well for them, and he seems like a really solid value play here. The leading scorer I'll talk about in the forward section is B.J. Freeman, but he has really solid play, and he's played really well in plus matchups, and this is definitely going to be one. His floor is pretty good, too. He doesn't really have a bad floor from the price point that he's at. Then we're going to look at Justin Thomas for Milwaukee as well. Milwaukee has a lot of guys that we got to like here. He's a little bit streakier than Pulliam because he comes off the bench and he doesn't get the consistent minutes. But his price is still really good for a value play, and he's absolutely dominated Cleveland State in the past 2 games that he's played against them. And so he definitely has some good upside here. As you can see, he has 10x. He has nearly 10x upside, but it's very unusual when he does get that. But he's managed to have some really big games against Cleveland State. and so I do think he's viable on the slate, but he is a little bit riskier than Pouliot or some of the others. Then we're going to look at Bryce McBride for Youngstown State. His price is around the same price as Thomas, and he does play decent minutes as a starter. He does have big time upside, but he does have a low floor as well. He's a good value play if you just need an alternative to some of the others, but he doesn't feel as safe simply because his floor is lower than most of the other players available. Then we're going to go ahead and get into the forwards, and we're going to start with our core play here of BJ Freeman. Now, he actually can play guard as well, but I see almost no reason to even consider him at guard, considering there's so many good guards available. But he seems way underpriced here. He's had two massive games versus Cleveland State this season. He's literally averaging 40 fantasy points a game against them on the season in the two games. He shoots a lot of shots. He's the leading scorer for the team. He is discounted for his potential here for some reason. You can play him at guard or forward, like I said, though you do want him at forward. He has no games under 10 fantasy points, or total points, rather, since December. He's been over 10 fantasy points all year long. He's had some absolutely monster games lately, having 60 fantasy points a couple games ago, and he's been over 40 in 3 straight games, which is pretty crazy. Even if his floor is really not that bad. He's had one bad game against Youngstown State where he scored 13 fantasy points total, but I don't really foresee something like that. He has big time upside here. He actually rebounds pretty well for a guard-ish forward guy too, so I think he's in a great spot and has all types of potential. He's got to be the biggest must play of the slate. So then we're going to go to our rest of our forwards, and we'll start with Drew Timme. Now, Timme is really priced up. He's the highest priced guy on the slate by a lot. His floor is lower than what we would want for a guy at this price, but you can easily roster him today if you want. He is worth taking a look. The blowout potential is dangerous here, and he hasn't played all that great against San Francisco this season. In the 2 games, he's averaging 27 fantasy points, which isn't ideal really for a guy that's costing this much money. But you can definitely get him in the lineup, and he definitely has as much upside as anybody, safest floor by a large margin of anybody on the slate. Then we're going to look at Tristan Enaruna, for Cleveland State. Now, he has just as much upside as just about anybody in his price range. He's been in the 40 fantasy point range a bunch of times this season. He hasn't had a sub 10 fantasy point game since December, and sub 10 point game rather since December. And he plays near max minutes and has smashed UWM a lot. As you can see, he's averaging 34 fantasy points against them this season, which is very good for this slate. So I definitely like him a lot here. Then we're going to look at Adrian Nelson for Youngstown. Now, he's in a similar boat when it comes to just price range of Enaruna, and he has just as much upside. He's played well all year. He's been in double figures in 15 straight games. He's probably the second best or the best 8K plus player on the slate, and has nice upside for a top tier scoring team on the particular slate. Then we're going to look at Malik Green here for Youngstown. Now, he's also very interesting today. He doesn't quite have as much of a ceiling as Nelson and Enaruna, but he is a good contrarian play because he does have that potential, and he's done it a couple times this season. And he's also been really good against Northern Kentucky, averaging 37 fantasy points. He rebounds decently well as well, though his floor is rough in some instances. He has dominated in KU, and it looks like he's a decent option on this particular slate. You could pretty much run any of those 3 guys that I just mentioned that are all within range of each other in any stretch you want at this position. And then we're going to look at Ahmad Rand for Milwaukee, Wisconsin as well. He has not been as consistent as some of the other players on his team, but he has dominated Cleveland State this season. Again, another guy that's just averaging 30 fantasy points against that team in the 2 games. His ceiling is 6 to 7x, which gives him some nice upside on the small slate, and he's had a few floor games as of late, but he's in a great spot, and he has a nice matchup, so I think he's definitely viable here. So overall, forward looks really good, guard looks really good with a lot of value there. You just got to mix and match guys to try to make it fit, and to use up as much of your price as your money as you can. But there's lots of different ways you can go about doing that. As for the team breakdown, we're going to start with Northern Kentucky here. Now, Northern Kentucky is not favored to win their game, and they're actually one of the lower scoring. They're second lowest team on the slate. They do play a six-man rotation, and they don't get far away from that very much. Those six are the only decent fantasy point per minute this team has, and Rhodes and Benson are definitely options on this slate. But they're not must plays because there's just so much value. And Warwick and the rest have some low end risky streaky value, but just because of all the value plays available, it's probably going to be good to steer clear from this team in general. As for Youngstown State, they are projected to win this game by 3 points, and they are one of the higher scoring teams on the slate, being the fourth, one of the just 5 teams, that are over 70 fantasy points. I think they're fourth in that. And they do, but it's all very close. They do play a 7 to 8 man rotation. Their starting 5 gets a lot of minutes and has one of the better and has some of the better scorers on the slate. It's hard to dislike any of their starters today as they are fairly priced, and they have a decent upside matchup here against Northern Kentucky, who they should be able to play well against and have in the past. As for BYU and St. Mary, we're going to start with BYU. BYU is a very deep bench team, having 9 guys playing over 14 minutes, and only one that eclipses over 30 minutes per game. That said, Spencer Johnson has some low-end upside, and Rudy Williams is a contrarian utility option at 6,600. I would stay away from everybody here simply because they're the lowest scoring team on the slate by quite a bit. But they do have a little bit of upside on some of the players, but they're just not must plays. On another slate with not so many value plays, there would definitely be a team to look at, though. Then we're going to look at St. Mary. They play a 6-man rotation, 5 of which play 32 minutes or more. Still one of the lower scoring teams on the slate, but they are projected to get the win here, and Logan Johnson looks like a decent play. Saxon also looks okay. Everyone else is overpriced, and they do have a little potential, but they are overpriced. And we have so many underpriced players on the slate, it's easy to avoid them. As for Cleveland State, we're going to talk about them next. They're favored to win their game by 3 points. They play 6 or 7 deep and have several players who play over 30 minutes. Teddy Williams feels like the best player on this high-scoring team, and Hill, who comes off the bench for 20 minutes per game, also has some nice value as a value play, but he's a little bit risky considering the fact that we have so many good guys under that price point that's better. And Naruna and Parker also both play 30 minutes and have some good upside on the slate. As for Milwaukee, now Freeman, Browning, and Pullian all seem way underpriced, and this team is underpriced in general. In 2 meetings with Cleveland State, they were both pretty tight games. This is the second highest scoring game on the slate, and this team is very stackable along with Cleveland State, having a couple players you could stack this game. I feel like it's a very good game to pull players from, just because people on Milwaukee are just so underpriced compared to what they can do in a up-tempo game like this. Then we're going to look at Gonzaga and San Francisco. I'll start with Gonzaga. They're favored to win this game by 13. They do play 7 or 8 guys on the bench, and mostly everyone has a good fantasy point per minute. Hickman may not start, and if he doesn't, that would boost Malachi Smith. So you do want to check in on that if you want to use those guys. But all their other stars have some nice upside, though Timmy does seem a little bit overpriced for his potential. He still has a good opportunity here, and it's definitely worth taking a look at stacking Gonzaga as well. As for San Francisco, they are the second highest scoring team on the slate simply because of the matchup here. They do play a 7-8 man rotation, and Shabazz is actually the safest play as a guard. If we can find info on whether Zane Meeks plays, then he could be viable if he does play, and if he hasn't played, then that would give Newberry some low-end upside as well. But this team is a little bit more risky than some of the other teams simply because their guys aren't priced as well as some of the other teams. So, with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.